Does the WWE star make the gimmick, or does the gimmick make the WWE star? This is a question that I, quite frankly, haven't put much thought into, as I've got much better things to do, but it is interesting that over the course of WWE history, we've seen some gimmicks played by various wrestlers for various reasons, with varying results. Interesting enough to do a list video on it anyway. I'm Sam Driver from Cultaholic Wrestling, and these are 10 WWE gimmicks played by multiple wrestlers. Join us! Number 10. The Spider Lady. The original Spider Lady was portrayed by Penny Mitchell, a trainee of the Fabulous Moolah who worked under her real name for not just WWE, but also promotions like All Japan Women and territories like Stampede and Mid-Atlantic from 1982 onwards. In the summer of '85, however, she was given the new gimmick of the Spider Lady. The gimmick? A lady wearing a spider mask and bodysuit. Very well thought out it was. She primarily competed against WWE Women's Champion Wendy Richter around the circuit until someone else went under the hood at a Madison Square Garden show on November 25th. Not content with taking 40 to 50% of Mitchell's booking fee, allegedly, Moolah stole the gimmick for a night in an infamous match that's been dubbed the original Screwjob. In it, the Spider Lady forced Richter's shoulders down to win the match and the title, as orchestrated by Vince McMahon, who wanted Wendy gone after she'd complained about payoffs. In 1998, Luna Vachon also masqueraded as the Spider Lady for a one-off angle where she turned heel on Sable. Number 9. Max Moon. After working a few WWE dark matches as the Latin Fury, Lucha Libre sensation Conan pitched Vince McMahon the idea of a futuristic, almost robot-like character who was said to be not of this world. McMahon loved the intricate, colourful costume and felt he could merchandise it to his young audience, so Conan began working as Relampago. It didn't take Conan long to realize that lugging boxes full of heavy gear from town to town in the US for not very good money wasn't quite as rewarding as being a main eventer and soap opera star south of the border. After skipping some TV tapings, Conan was fired, even if he'd basically already quit, but WWE still had an expensive costume and an idea for a child-friendly gimmick. Surveying the locker room, they pointed at Paul Diamond, aka Kato of the Orient Express, and said, "Oi! Diamond, you old slag! You'll fit this suit, won't you?" And thus, Max Moon was born. The Comet Kid was only around for a few months, but in that time he managed to participate in the Royal Rumble and challenge Shawn Michaels for the Intercontinental title on the very first episode of Raw. Number 8. Doink the Clown. The idea of an evil wrestling clown came from the mind of Road Warrior Hawk, who saw the curmudgeonly Matt Bourne in the dressing room and shouted, "Krusty!" The gimmick quickly caught on, thanks in large part to the dark edge of Bourne, who lent Doink a very uneasy quality. Bourne played Doink for about a year, with the wig being passed to Ray Apollo after Bourne was fired. Apollo then played the babyface version of Doink for the best part of a couple of years, though the character essentially became a glorified jobber. Which made Doink a fitting gimmick for Steve Lombardi, aka the Brooklyn Brawler, who took over on house shows and then played Doink various times when the clown would show up on WWE TV in later years, though Apollo and even Bourne were drafted in for one-offs. Aside from the core three, Doink's also been portrayed by Steve Cairn, Nick Dinsmore, aka Eugene, and a bunch of other wrestlers including Jeff Jarrett and Chris Jericho, who donned the face paint for different angles. The beauty and simplicity has made Doink an easy one for people to do unofficially on the indies, though the less we talk about Alabama Doink, the better. Number 7. Los Conquistadores. The 1980s is viewed as a golden era for tag team wrestling in WWE, with the likes of the Hart Foundation, the Rockers, the British Bulldogs, and others establishing the division as a real force. Of course, those teams needed other, lesser teams to beat in order to build themselves up, which is where duos like Los Conquistadores came in handy. Clad in full-body gold spandex suits and wrestling as Uno and Dos, Los Conquistadores were about as generic as you could get, the perfect punching bags for bigger acts. They could also work a darn decent match when called upon, due to the fact they were portrayed by experienced Puerto Rican technicians Jose Luis Rivera and Jose Estrada Sr. Los Conquistadores re-emerged in 2000, though it was not the Jose's who were under the masks. First, Edge and Christian, and then the Hardys portrayed Los Conquistadores during a short storyline where Christopher Daniels and Aaron Aguilera also wore the gold. In 2003, Los Conquistadores randomly reappeared for a match on SmackDown, with OVW standouts Nick Dinsmore and Rob Conway playing them. 10 days later at Vengeance, Los Conquistadores were involved in the APA Barroom Invitational, with Conway and Johnny Jeter told to suit up. And Kurt Angle played a Conquistador during his final WWE feud with Baron Corbin, because that's where he was, sadly. Number 6, Sin Cara. There was a lot of excitement when it was announced that Mystico, the high-flying sensation who had been the biggest star in Lucha Libre for the best part of the previous decade, had signed with WWE in 2011. Botchy matches, a suspension due to a violation of WWE's wellness policy, and other issues meant that enthusiasm quickly wore off, and it seemed as though the Sin Cara experiment was going to be a bust. But while he was gone on his 30-day vacation, WWE began planting seeds for his return feud by having developmental wrestler Jorge Rodriguez play the character in his absence. This was especially interesting, as Rodriguez had previously portrayed Mystico in Mexico prior to the more famous Mystico's exploding popularity, which resulted in Rodriguez changing his name to Incognito. The real Sin Cara soon returned, and the two began a storyline that saw the imposter Sin Cara eventually change to black attire as he was renamed Sin Cara Negro, while the babyface Sin Cara was dubbed Sin Cara Azul. Azul ultimately unmasked Negro after winning a mask match in Mexico City, but after a spell as Hunico, Rodriguez remasked and portrayed Sin Cara for the next 6 years after the other one was released by the company. Number 5, Razor Ramon and Diesel. Losing both Scott Hall and Kevin Nash, who left WWE for the greener pastures of WCW, was a big blow for WWE. And by greener pastures, I of course mean greener in the sense that they were going to be paid a lot more of the green stuff by the Turner-backed organization. But hold on a second, was it really Hall and Nash that WWE fans loved, or their alter egos, Razor Ramon and Diesel? WWE were about to quickly find out the answer after they decided to transplant 2 other warm bodies into the costumes once worn by Big Daddy Cool and the Bad Guy. Rick Bogner was drafted in to play Ramon, and it's fair to say that he had less than 1/10 of the machismo that Hall possessed when doing his Tony Montana imitation. Glenn Jacobs, meanwhile, was picked to play the new and not at all improved Diesel. Both men had the mannerisms down and bore a slight resemblance to the people who had originally played the parts, if you squinted, but fans saw right through the act, though I doubt WWE actually expected it to get over. Number 4, Kane. Of course, Glenn Jacobs would go on to have a long Hall of Fame career as Kane. One of WWE's most enduring characters, it's hard to imagine anyone else as the Big Red Machine, so good was Jacobs in the role. Well, actually, it's not that hard to imagine anyone else as Kane, since somebody else was Kane for a fleeting moment. While The Undertaker may have dressed up as his kayfabe brother that one time for an angle, in the summer of 2006, another Kane emerged and attacked the real thing. This new Kane was actually the old Kane, wearing the character's previous ring attire and sporting a dreadful wig to differentiate himself from the Kane who had since unmasked and shaved his head. And it was that wig that almost immediately soured Vince McMahon on the storyline and led to its hasty conclusion after the two Kanes had clashed in a match at Vengeance. The imposter Kane was played by Luke Gallows, a WWE developmental prospect and very good brother who would get another shot on the main roster a year later as Festus. That wig doesn't look so bad now, does it, Gallows? Number 3, The Undertaker. With characters like Kane and his undead brother The Undertaker, who went through many different phases during their WWE careers, there were always rumors about the men who played them. On the playground back in the day, the talk was that multiple people played Kane and The Undertaker after they both apparently perished. Not true, of course, but young, stupid brains were not helped by the Phenom being put into a casket, ostensibly dying inside of it, and then ascending to the heavens at the 1994 Royal Rumble. In Mark Calloway's absence, primetime Brian Lee showed up as an imposter Undertaker, an underfaker, if you will. This new taker, Ted DiBiase claimed, was now motivated by the power of his vast riches, not the urn in Paul Bearer's possession. He worked a bunch of matches on TV before the real deal returned at SummerSlam for a frankly rotten Undertaker vs. Undertaker main event. There, the imposter Undertaker was beaten and put into a casket, ending the storyline and killing off the character. Lee would also come back a few years later as Disciples of Apocalypse member Chains. Number 2, Demolition Smash. Demolition eventually established themselves as one of the most dominant WWE tag teams of all time, but things were a little ropey in the early days as a team. And that had more than a little to do with the fact that Smash was not portrayed by Barry Darsow. No, to begin with, Demolition Smash was played by none other than Randy Colley, who fans may or may not know better as Moondog Rex. Well, WWE fans at the time certainly recognized him as Rex, which was the main reason he didn't last in the tag team. Despite cutting his hair, shaving off his beard, and covering his face with paint, punters immediately clocked that it was Colley and began chanting Moondog at him during the 2 television tapings he worked as Smash. Those tapings, plus a Soul House show, were enough to convince WWE that it wasn't gonna work out, and Colley was replaced by Darsow, who went on to have a Hall of Fame run alongside Bill Eadie. Look, even if they're not in the Hall of Fame, they really should be. Wink wink, Mr. Levesque. And number 1, Sting. Alright, we know Sting was a WCW wrestler, yes, but he actually is in the WWE Hall of Fame, and he worked a few matches for the promotion, so we're getting by on technicalities here, alright? Sometimes it's just hard to hit the magic 10, you know, and what am I gonna do? 9. Nonsense. Utter woke nonsense. Anyway, with his blonde flat top, colourful garb, and iconic face paint, the Stinger has been ripe for cosplay over the years, with Barry Windham, Jeff Jarrett, Eric Young, Ken Anderson, and others dressing up as Surfer Sting for segments, angles, and matches. The same's also been true for the so-called Crow Sting, from when he went all emo during the New World Order's WCW takeover in the mid-90s, which led to the creation of NWO Sting. Portrayed by Jeff Farmer, this fake Sting had fans and WCW stars questioning Sting's loyalties due to Farmer's physical resemblance to Steve Borden, and the bang-up job the FX crew did with the makeup and costume. It was a memorable role for the man who had previously wrestled as the Cobra, and it got over big in Japan too, with NWO Sting becoming a star for New Japan.